This is a lecture from Open Tuition. For the free lecture notes that go with this podcast, please visit opentuition.com.
Overhead allocation, apportionment, absorption. I've kept this as short as I can, but hopefully enough to remind you what's happening. Remember, if we were doing a cost card, materials and labour per unit we can measure, they shouldn't be a problem. Where the problem always comes is how much we're going to charge each unit for overheads. And what I've done here, there are basically three separate little problems which tend to go together. But look at it with me. It says Jones has allocated overheads between departments as follows. Here we have 4 departments in our factory, A and B, whatever they are, and repairs and maintenance. And so we've allocated the overheads between the 4 departments, and let me set it up. A, B, repairs and maintenance. 336,000 to A, 210,000 to B, 42,000 to repairs, 28 to maintenance. And remember the words, because you could be tested, quite likely, one question, testing you simply on the words with no numbers at all. These overheads have been allocated. And remember what we mean by allocated. Allocated is where you give it to the relevant department. But because of the 3 words, the other 2 I'm coming to, but that's what we mean by allocated. If part of the overheads, if maybe 10,000 of the overheads were a supervisor in Department A, then that's definitely a cost of Department A. You'd give it to Department A, you'd allocate. Okay? However, carrying on, it says there are general overheads of 308,000, which are to be apportioned. So with extra overheads here, how much was it? 308,000? And when it says they're to be apportioned, well again, because they might test you on the words, apportioned means shared between departments. That maybe the total rent bill for the factory is 308,000. We just get one bill. But we then have to share it between the departments. Give a bit to each department. If it's rent, probably on the size of the department and so on. But here it says we're to split it, apportion it 40%, 30, 20, 10. Check me. But 40% of 308,000 goes to Department A. Check me, I think 123,200. 30% to Department B, which is 92,400. 20% to repairs. So 20% of 308, 61,600. And finally 10% to maintenance, which is what? 3,800. Stop me the minute you need, but is everybody clear what I'm doing? Nobody's clear, but I'll carry on since nobody's said anything. No problem. We've now split the overheads in one way or another between the 4 departments. But the next step, remember, we want to charge all the overheads to production departments. And it says here that A and B are production. Repairs and maintenance are service departments. And remember what we mean. The repairs and maintenance, although they are departments in the factory, they're costs of the factory. They're not making anything. Repairs and maintenance are doing work for the other departments. If you have any service departments, we need to charge their cost to the departments they work for. And so if I recharge, first of all, maintenance, the total overhead for maintenance is 58.8. It says in that little table below that maintenance, they work for the others, 40% for A, 40% for B, 20% for repairs. And so we'll take the 58.8 and we'll recharge it. Again, check my arithmetic, but here there should be no problem, it's simply speed. But how do they do the work? 40% is for A. So 40% of 58.8 is 23,520. 40% to B, so again 23,520. 10% is, no, 20%, I'm sorry, to repairs. Well, 20% of 58.8, 11,760. I'm not going to keep asking, but you stop me the minute you're not clear. But charge maintenance where it does the work. And in a similar way, repairs is a service department. And so let's recharge repairs. The total overhead in this department is, I think, 115,360. And so in the same sort of way, take that total, recharge it. And how are we told to charge it? 60% to A, 40% to B. So 60% of that, I think 69,216 to A. 40%, 46,144 to B. We've now dealt with both service departments, and therefore the total overhead to each production department. I hope somebody's checking my additions. The total for A is 551,936, and the total for B is it 372064? Nobody's helping me. Has anyone checked my additions? Yes? Thank you. However, as I said, they're really... You, Katerina, you look worried. You alright? I think it's your calculator, but you clear what I'm trying to do? Yes, good. As I said, whether you find it very easy or you haven't thought about it for a while, there are really four things I want to check here. One was simply the words, what we mean by allocate and apportion. Secondly, the recharging here of the departments. I hope we're all clear, because that could be one all on its own. The third thing, though, is remember, having got the total overheads for each production department, we need to determine a charging rate or an absorption rate. There's no rule in overheads about how you charge them. A company does whatever it thinks is sensible. For the exam, though, almost always we'll charge on an hourly basis. We work out an hourly rate based either on labour hours or on machine hours. Department A, for example, we know what the total overheads are. We're going to work out a cost per hour, as I say, it's always either a cost per labour hour or a cost per machine hour. If you're not told, use some sense. If you look at the bit below, it says budgeted labour hours. We're budgeting on working 40,000 hours in A, 8,000 hours in B. It also tells us how many hours we expect to work on the machines. Laura, you look worried. Is it my additions?
I didn't get the total number, the total.
Okay, trust me, I think the total is right. Yeah. So let's assume it is. So has anybody checked the totals? Yeah. Oh, trust me then, honest, we can check your additions later. The labour hours in each department, 40 and 8. The machine hours in each department is 5,000 for A and 60 for B. In the exam, read carefully. If they tell you what to do, you do what you're told. If not, use some common sense. For Department A, first of all, surely, since most of the work is being done by labour, Department A, 40,000 labour hours, machine hours are only 5,000. Since most of the work is done by labour in Department A, we'll work out a cost per labour hour. So the labour hours in Department A is how many? 40,000. And therefore, the cost per hour, 551,936 in total, 40,000 hours. Each labour hour is effectively costing us, to the nearest cent, is it 13.80? And in the exam, unless you're told differently, do it to the nearest cent. And so every hour worked in A will be charged at 13.80 per labour hour. And what I shouldn't need remind you, but let me, the terminology, the charging rate, the cost per hour, that is the absorption rate. Every labour hour worked in A will charge overheads $13.80. Similarly, though, Department B. I hope I hardly need say, but you tell me. What would be the most sensible way of charging in Department B? Labour hours or machine hours? Yeah, since most of the work is on machines, work out a cost per machine hour. There are 60,000 machine hours. And therefore the cost per hour, 372,064 over 60,000. Again to the nearest cent, I get $6.20 per machine hour. So although we're not going to cost out any units here, if we were costing out units, we'd take the material cost, we'd take the labour cost, but overheads, we'd charge $13.80 for every hour each unit takes in Department A. In addition, we'd charge $6.20 for every hour each unit takes in Department B. Okay? Alright, one more thing, and before we do it, it relates to it, do remember that these absorption rates, these charging rates, we can't wait till the end of the year to work them out, to find out what the cost actually was, to find out what the hours actually were. The absorption rates are always based on budget figures, budget costs, and budget hours. We base it on budget figures. Even though, if you remember, and you're about to see, when we come to the end of the month or end of the year, the actual costs could end up being different. The actual hours worked could end up being different. But I say again, for costing, you can't wait till the end of the month, end of the year. You have to base it on budget. All right? Or another word for that which they might use, we call it a predetermined rate. It's calculated in advance, yet again based on our budget figures. Which leads straight on to the last thing for this sheet. You will be asked about splitting overheads between departments, the first bit. You will be asked to do an absorption rate, as we've done, the second bit. Thirdly, though, look at example B, which is actually a separate one. Example B. Smith Limited has budgeted overheads and budgeted labour hours of 50,000. Before we read any more, I've just said twice, but you must remember, the absorption rate is always based on budgeted figures. So we'll worry about what actually happened later. We budgeted on overheads of 200,000. We budgeted on 50,000 labour hours. And therefore, the absorption rate, the charging rate, $4 per labour hour. Is everybody clear there? Alright, you'd worked that out at the beginning of the year, and therefore every unit we produce, you'll be charging hours at $4 each. The problem, though, as I said a moment ago, is that, of course, even though you budgeted on spending 200,000, come to the end of the month or year and the actual spend may have been different. Come to the end of the month or year, and although we'd budgeted on working 50,000 hours, the actual work might be more, might be less. You agree? And so, I'm not worried. On the previous courses I showed you a sort of profit statement. I'm not worried about the profit statement here, except insofar as at the end of the month, end of the year, we may have to make an adjustment to put things right. Because at the end of the month or year, we look back, maybe we've charged too many or too few overheads. We end up with an over or under absorption of overheads. We'll check which here in a moment. But all we're doing, at the end of the period, we say how much were the actual overheads and if you look at the question, the last line says the actual overheads were 205,000. We need to check whether we've charged too much or too little, given that we're charging at $4 per hour. And the important thing, it's easy numbers, but make sure you're happy with it and you remember it. The total that we'll have absorbed or charged every hour that's actually been worked will have been charged at this $4. So the total, well, the actual hours worked, we'd worked 48,000. Again, every hour worked will have been charged at the absorption rate of here $4. And therefore, we'll have charged overheads during the period of 192,000. So that's what we'll have charged in our profit statements. We need to check what the actual total was and make an adjustment as to whether we've over or undercharged. Well, the difference here is what? I think 13,000. I said a minute ago, the numbers themselves are easy, it's just being careful which numbers. Finally, though, your choices of answers in the exam, 13,000 would appear twice. There'd be overcharged over absorbed 13, there'd be undercharged under absorbed. Which is it here, please? Have we over or under absorbed?
Over.
Have we overcharged or undercharged? It's one of the two. Liga, how much have we charged? How much have we absorbed? Oh. That's what we actually paid. How much have we absorbed or charged? We've absorbed 192 at $4 for every hour. If we've only absorbed 192, have we charged too much or too little? Too little. We'll have charged in our statements 192. It turns out the total cost was 205. We haven't charged enough. We've undercharged or under-absorbed. It could have been either way, obviously. But do make sure you're happy. The numbers, obviously, you can learn. I've said in other circumstances, although this week is the week to make sure you're clear what we're doing and why, in the exam, you don't have to waste time thinking. It's just got to be a rule's a rule. It's not a hard rule. The numbers are easy. But make sure you are convinced. Are you convinced now, Liga? But all of you, ask me separately if you need. Make sure you are convinced that we've undercharged by 13. We charge that much. We've now found out it should be that much. We've not charged enough. Because again, it's such a shame, obviously, to remember the rule and get the figure right. But then, you know what I mean, get it the wrong way round. Yeah?